Hi everyone, it's Tamara here with another card making tutorial. This time I'm using one of the new Halloween sets from Wandering Rabbit called Nightmares. I'm going to be doing an ink blended background and creating this kind of scene, also using COPIC colors, and then just a little bit of stamping and heat embossing. So let's get started. I've already printed my image out onto some COPIC XPress It cardstock, and just using a mini Slimline stitched rectangle die, I've run that through my die cutting machine. I'm also going to be using the So Special stamp set from Honeybee Stamps at the top of my image, and I was going to use this classy stencil to kind of create a wallpaper background, but in the end I end up not doing that because I was going to be doing the heat embossing with the sentiment, and I thought that might get in the way with those stripes. So off camera I have actually just cut out a mask for my image, and now I'm just creating with some leftover pieces of masking paper a little floor. That's where I'll be doing some Copic coloring to create the floor. Now for my ink blending, I'm using Kitsch Flamingo, picked raspberry and black soot to create my wall background. So I'm just using my dome sponge applicators and just being very careful because sometimes it is a little bit difficult to do some ink blending, but because they're quite similar colors, I found that the actual dome sponge applicators didn't work too badly. Now I always build up my colors from the lightest working into the darkest so that you get a nice smooth blend, and also that dark pink color doesn't overtake our lighter pink color down the bottom. And I'll do the same. I just do the black soot right up the very top, and then I'll work that picked raspberry up into the black soot, and it just works so much better with that. You can see that white mark. I did do some actual ink splattering recently, and I had this on my desk and got a little bit of a splatter on there. So just be careful to clear anything that you don't want any splatters on away on your craft desk. So to swap out that black soot stained ink pad, I've just grabbed another ink pad and then going in with the other colors at the base, and then I'll set that aside to dry. Now that that's panels completely dry, I have taken off the mask, and now I've got that perfect area for my floor. So I'm going in with my end markers to create a dark floor, and I'm just going putting in my darkest shadows in with the N8, the darkest marker. So obviously our little angry unicorn, our zombie unicorn, will be throwing a shadow, as well as those pieces of patches that she's using to apply to herself. So now I'm using my N7 marker to blend out that N8. And just working in little flicking motions to get a nice smooth blend. And I'm just going to work down through my end markers until I have my floor covered. And then when I was doing this N6, I thought I really need to kind of base my scene. So I've gone back to my darkest marker, and I'm just going to put a little bit of darker color down the bottom just to kind of ground my scene. Now I'm going in with that N7 to blend out that N8, and then bring that N6 back in. And now I can go through all my colors again because I've caught up to what I've done around my little angry zombie unicorn. Now we'll go in with the N5, just blending out that N6, just slowly working that marker out into that light space, going around the top of our image, and also the top of the floor up the top around our little pin cushion. Then I'll bring in my N4, and then we'll finish off with our N2 as our highlight color. So I'm only just putting a small amount of N2 because I wanted a nice dark floor. So our N2 now, and just going to work that together until we've got that nice smooth blend. Now we'll start on colouring our zombie unicorn. So I'm just going in with my lightest colour, which will be my G20, just to work out where all my shadows are going to be. I'm just kind of having the light coming to that left-hand side of my, to the right-hand side. So obviously the hair and the horn will be throwing a bit of shadow, as will the head over the body. Also where the legs come over and at the bottom of this arm, around that leg, and also just at the back here. Now all of the colours I'll have up in the top left hand corner as I go through all my colouring, but I will also have them in the description box below if you need to refer to any of the colours I use. So I'm going just around there, just working out where I want my darkest colours. Then I'm going to bring in my BG93 to blend that out. And obviously around the eyes, we'll also kind of have that bit of shadow where that eyebrow comes over. And I will come back in and do that shortly. And I will go over all these colours again to make sure that I've got a nice smooth blend. So you'll see me colour this again and just work on those shadow areas. The next colour in our greens will be G21. Just slowly blending into our white cardstock, which will be our highlight colour. So you see the kind of top of the leg. That is going to be more exposed to the light. And we'll bring in our final colour, the G20, to blend out the G21. Just working in little circular motions to get a nice smooth blend. Now I wanted more of contrast, but I don't want to go back in with my darkest BG99, but I'm going to go back in with that BG96 instead and just reinforce all those shadows. So I didn't want it too dark, so I thought going back in with that darkest colour might just be a little bit too much. And I've got around the eye there, so I will come back in later and do that. Blend that out with our BG93. Obviously up into that ear, to that chest, which will be in a bit of darkness. The leg will be mainly in the dark, and these will be our main sections that will be catching the light. We'll go in with our G21 to blend that out. As you can see, just working those nice circular motions to get a nice blend. These colours do blend really nicely together. Now I'm keeping the paws or the hooves for my highlight colour, which I'm going to use for the patches and the hair, but I accidentally did colour that one that's holding the needle, so you will see me come in later and colour that to match. Now I'm just going in around that eye as I mentioned before, just to kind of get a bit more shadow where that eye comes down. And blend that out into that G20. Now this is where I'm going to be doing my purple markers, which will be my hair, which will also be my patches, and which will also be my hooves. So I'm just going kind of down the bottom, which will be furthest away from the light, and also going into those hooves. So initially I will look at it here and think, what about that other one? But I will come back in later and do that. So obviously where that tail spins around, I've added a bit of shadow in there. Now we'll blend that out with the VO6, working into our highlight space, coming up with our little shadows down the bottom. Also in our patches and the hooves. Now I do miss that one. No, I don't. I get that one. I think when I do this one, I end up missing that arm patch. So I'm blending out now with the VO5 as my highlight colour to the tips of the hair. And we'll also do that with the, I forgot to actually do that little eye. Come back in with the VO5 and now blend out our patches and our hooves with our VO5 and our tail. And we've got that all nice and blended now. As I mentioned, I forgot that little patch down there. Now I'm going to do this little patch because it's far enough away with the purple. But under the tail, because I've got the tail there, I don't want to do another purple patch. So I'm going to do the same green that we did our zombie so that stands out underneath that purple tail, and I'll also do the same with this pin cushion. So I'm just trying to keep the similar colours throughout the whole scene, so I'm not having to grab out a heap of markers, and just blending it out exactly the same as we did with our zombie body. And final colour is the G20 to fully blend that out. Now with the eye, I like to add a little bit of shadow there so that you can see that it has been coloured, it hasn't been forgotten. And also inside that little ear, I'm just going to use some red markers for that. Now with that horn, I'm going to do striped horn. So instead of it just doing, because it is quite small, different stripes, I'm going to go in initially with my C markers and do a white stripe, and then let that dry while I just colour a few other things. So I'm just going to add some dark N8 to the bottom of those neat tops of those pins, and then just use the N4 to blend that out. And now once that C markers have dried, I can go in with my dark markers. So I've got a black and white striped horn, but I've only had to kind of really go small into those little bits where our black markers are, or our dark grey markers. And I'll also just do that needle, so a bit of N8 down the bottom and just N4 to blend that up to the peak. Now this is where I decide I will colour that paw or that hoof to match the other hooves. And I'm just going in with those V markers. So it is a slightly different colour, but it still kind of matches in a lot better. Now all our colouring's done, I'm going to grab out my Misti stamping tool so we can get our sentiment stamped up the top. So I'm just going to pull that out and centre that kind of centered just above our zombie's head, and also in between our two stitch lines, and use my anti-static powder tool to prep our cardstock to make sure our powder only goes where we're wanting it. So I've gone in with my Versa Watermark ink, and we'll give that a good stamp. Because it's quite a thick stamp, I'm just going to give that a double stamp up to make sure we've got a nice amount of ink there to catch with our white heat embossing powder. So now we'll sprinkle that on. I've got my paper down the bottom to catch that, and I'm going to preheat my heat tool, go into the back first and then come to the front so that that's all nice and melted. And then I'll set that aside to dry, and then just clean off the excess powder once that's dry. And this is the finished card for today's tutorial. These gorgeous little nightmares are just so fun to colour, and you can colour them in a variety of colours. You'll see me doing some others recently in purples, and I've got another one that we're coming up shortly as well. I hope you've enjoyed this card making tutorial. If you have, please hit the like button, and if you'd like to see any future videos, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.